The theme for this year's exhibition is Resiliency Flows. And a little bit of backstory of how we come to the theme piece of it is that we actually have a community planning committee. They really were focused on the ideas of what is it going to mean as a community to come out of COVID-19, and one of the just topics that kept bubbling to the surface with them was the idea of resiliency, of people and communities being resilient. And so that was really why we set on the resiliency piece of it, but then for the fact that this exhibition happens along the waterway, we wanted to tie in that the Mississippi River and flowing water. As people demonstrate resiliency in a community, it helps that resiliency to flow out through different populations and different groups of people within a community so that we can all be strong together as we come back.
Well, I think the idea of flow was one of the big draws for me. Flow, resiliency and flow. So my work's always been about flow, and I think that it kind of just struck a chord with my ideology with my approach to sculpture. So I felt like it was appropriate for my work. Connections are a big idea for me. You'll see like volumetric forms connected by very tenuous flowing forms, and I figured that the meaning of the show, flow and resiliency and reconnecting, the whole being resilient through COVID and trying to kind of bridge a gap. I feel like 2020 was like a gap in time for everyone. So for me, it's like you get one firm place and you get this other firm place you're trying to reach towards, and you can kind of try to make a connection between those two. And the flow in my sculpture is just kind of the way that I'm trying to bridge that gap in time.
I created a scale model of the Mississippi and its major tributaries. I created them out of bamboo poles. So not only is it this singular object, but the object is made up of many individual pieces. A fitting metaphor for our society and how we've had to act. The title of the entire show is Resiliency Flows, and I think that kind of intrigued me. And I started thinking about that word resiliency. And, you know, we've all had to be very resilient over the last year and a half. And that was kind of my jumping off point. And I was interested in making something site specific. So it's about this place and about this time. And putting those words together, Resiliency Flows, I also started thinking about the Mississippi River and this site, which is just a beautiful location on the banks of the Mississippi. And, you know, started thinking about the pandemic. We've all had to be resilient, and the reality is we've had to think about other people. We've had to think about how our actions affect others downstream from us. So I think the river system, all the tributaries, was really a good metaphor for how our society has had to come to that realization that we affect other people.
I basically, you talk of me as a metal artist, but I basically have a woman's background in paper. And if you think of metal as permanent paper, it works, okay? So we only get volume by a fold or a curve. And part of this resilience, because coming out of COVID, that's what we need. And we can't be alone in resilience. And that's why this is Resilience Generations, okay? And we all have to work together. So you have the ancestors that are negative space, you have cut out the adult who's positive because they're living now, and then the child comes from the body of the adult, and then, because we don't want to waste anything, in between, when there is a line that you make with a pencil or a pen, if you blow it up big, the computer says it has width. And so we get a peek of the future. It's not solid yet because it's the future. So we just get a peek between the adult and the child because they have to work together. One of the things about resilience, we have to work together to conserve, and so we start with a big piece of metal and there is absolutely no waste.
I have some nieces that said, Uncle Tim, I bet you can't tell us the types of rock that our earth is made of. And I said, I'll bet you I can. Anyways, they had had a course in like geology that day or whatever class. And I remembered back when I had those type of classes and how interesting it was to like learn that there's different types of stone. So then we were able to put that up and I'm like, look girls, Uncle Tim made you a sculpture that someday you can have at your house. So they were thrilled about it. It was more of a relearning process for me than it was for them.
Its Latin name is Pluma Sculptura, so I gave it a fancy name, but the nickname is the feather. My work is, accessible. You don't have to think too hard about it. I'm in love with public sculpture just because of that fact, because it's accessible to all, and you don't have to buy a ticket to see it. You don't have to get an invitation. It's right there. The idea that you have to create something that is structurally sound and can brave the elements and public, touching it. I love the interactivity of public sculpture. I think art is really important. I think public art really does something. It generates unity and solidarity and just a sense of wonder. For me personally, I'm just happy that people are interested in art and seeing others express themselves in a variety of ways.
This particular sculpture is one of 3 so far that have been dealing with sort of our industrialization of our crops and our natural environment, specifically with corn as it pertains to the Midwest. And I'm from the Quad Cities, the home of John Deere originally, and so I have a long history with harvesting as well as manufacturing and factories and as they relate to our environment. And so yeah, this is one of those pieces with some added inspiration of the food service workers and sort of frontline people the last couple of years, and everyone doing to-go food, just itching to get out, do things, see people. And so it kind of came together that way. Certainly wasn't something that I was planning going into it, but it really, like a lot of things the last 2 years, it just developed slowly and came to be.
I grew up near the beach, so I used to spend time watching the ocean, trying to figure out what made the waves and things like that. So the single twist is a response to the twisting that the water does in the ocean. Yeah, it's also about mathematical. It's about trying to answer the question of when a plane is rising upward, like it could be a plane of water, and then a force impedes on it, what makes it start to curve or twist? Resiliency is just that the form can twist on itself and untwist on itself, one following the other.
This piece is called coral. A lot of people recognize coral as like an important element in our oceans and seas. And so I'm trying to bring awareness of how important coral and just aquatic plants are to the health of an environment or river system. So that's kind of the impetus of my design, and my whole life has been around waterways, around environmental, but I've seen a lot of changes in our environment over the years. And I feel like for me to have a platform to show my ideas, when people see the piece, they can either take their own meaning from it or they can read the description and at least bring some awareness of it.
We're on the banks of the Mississippi, right, the Hahawakpa in Dakota, and I am just upriver in St. Paul, just a little bit upstream. And this piece is called We Are All Downstream. And it really is about trying to acknowledge our place in the world, to realize that for everyone who is upstream from us, we are upstream from someone else. And that can be about the actual river itself and the health of the river, right? Because we have appreciated and protected the river, we've used and abused the river. And whatever we do to it where we are, someone else receives that downstream. So in some ways, what I wanted to create was something that mimicked the bridge trestles and the buoys and the markers along the channels with a warning on top, right? Something to say we have to pay attention, we have to protect the river, and to think too, not just about the river itself, the water itself, but also about the people along the river. So the rocks that gather in the quadrants of the piece are black, red, yellow, and white, the four directions in Dakota spirituality and mythology. And they are just below the water level, marked by a blue wooden piece that seems to say the stories are right there under the surface.
It's inspired by nature, and it's kind of like a fish and it's kind of like a bird. And it's not really either. It's, in a way, it's sort of a cross between those two things. I like to keep my work very abstract, so it's not specifically a recognizable creature. It's kind of more a creature out of my imagination. And maybe it has a kind of a prehistoric creature look to it, like something that you might find a fossil of and wonder what it was. This particular sculpture was actually created really specifically for this kind of a show. It's relatively easy to move around, but it's also super stable, and it's designed so that the moving parts are high up out of reach, and so it won't hurt anybody. And I think it's because of the fact that it moves and it kind of looks like a creature. Certainly it really appeals to children. Even for me, when I was a kid and I first got interested in sculpture that moved is what got my attention. And so it's the kind of thing that you can sort of contemplate over some period of time. You can see it on one day and it'll be totally different on another day. Come back in the winter when it's windy and gray, the color will be different, it'll be moving, you know, it's just a whole different thing.
The name of the piece is Mother Earth, and I always wanted to sculpt a Mother Earth, and I wanted to sculpt a piece that would be approachable for people to gather around and be able to touch it and maybe sit on it and, you know, take pictures and just kind of be close to Mother Earth. So I made the piece into more or less a bench, so you can kind of sit on it and enjoy the surroundings of her bounty on her blanket. Being an artist and being a sculptor, there's so many times where it says do not touch, do not climb, you know, just look from a distance, which is fine. Some sculptures require that because they're fragile, but she's made of bronze, so she can take it, you know, she can take it. She's 500 pounds of bronze. I knew that it was going to be on the Mississippi River, and it turned out that she was installed on Indigenous Peoples Day. I had to put a face to Mother Earth. So that was kind of quite a challenge on what kind of face would I think Mother Earth would have. And my mind and my heart veered towards a Native American woman. This area I know is very prominent for Native Americans, being close to the river and all the beautiful hills and everything that Dubuque has to offer. And so when we saw the application to apply, I just thought that she would be a nice fit.
Think about how you can take one simple idea and have it expressed in 11 different ways is something I hope that they take in. And I also just hope they find something that they really fall in love with and hopefully brings them a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of joy for the day If you're not able to come down to the Riverwalk, but there's a way that you can engage with it online, we actually have People's Choice voting where you can go to our website, you can see all the pieces, you can read about them, about the artist, and then you can vote for your favorites. All of the Art on the River sculptures are available for purchase, and the way that that ends up helping the program is a portion of the sale price is retained by the city, the majority of the sale price going to the artist, but we retain a piece of the sale price, and that just goes into the program year after year after year to help to keep it going.